So now we've talked a little bit about the negative view of dyslexia and how that's an important part of managing strategies. Let's look a little bit at what some of these strategies are and understanding dyslexia and building good systems, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So, first of all, understanding working memory. Now, working memory is basically your brain's post-it note. So this is the way that generally working memory is described. When you receive a piece of information, generally verbally, your brain's like, cool, what am I going to do with this? Like, what's going on here? Like, I'm just going to hold it here for a sec, and then I'm going to figure out what the fuck is going on. Do I need to answer a question? Do I need to remember this? Do I should move it to short-term memory? Do I need to move it to long-term memory? Do I move to procedural memories? What's going on? And then once it figures out what to do with the information, it moves it off working memory and it does something else with it. So your brain is trying to do something with the information that is coming in. So that's what working memory is. It's basically your brain being like, cool, what do you want from me, guys? Like, how can I help here? It's like the landing space. It's the hospital waiting room, if you will. But what I want you to think about in terms of understanding dyslexia and working memory is I want you to think about your memory in terms of a dining room table. So some people have huge, grand dining room tables. I mean, everyone's working memory is pretty small, but huge, grand dining room table, which can fit loads of plates. And each plate is a little nugget of information. It's tapas, so it's just like one little nugget of information, loads and loads of plates. Eventually, the table will fill up and the plates will overflow, and you will forget whatever it is. So when the plate falls off the table, game over. Do not remember that piece of information. It's fallen out of your working memory. So, like we said, other people, big table, us, itty bitty side table, unfortunately. So, what that means is the number of plates we can store on our table is significantly reduced. So, what often people are doing when they're saying, I'm just going to try harder, I'm just going to be better, I just want to try and not seem dyslexic, I just want to handle the problem myself, they're coming to the solution of how can I make my table bigger? Because that way I can hide, that way I can pretend that I'm not dyslexic, that way I can seem fine. But in reality, that's not really possible. That's not really how it works. So when I think about building solutions and ways of managing working memory, it's about how can we turn tables? How can we get those plates off the table and tell your brain, cool, I'm like, I got this, like you're going to do this with it or you're going to do that with it. Because remember, it's just trying to figure out what to do with it. So where are you going to move the information to keep space for new plates? So that's the idea of what is working memory. Good systems don't look to increase the size of your table, but it's about clearing the plates more effectively. That's generally what you want to think about when you're managing working memory. Now, that's what it is. So it's a post-it note and it's a dining room table. Hopefully that's like a nice image for dyslexic people to kind of wrap their head around and understand. I wanted to give you a few examples that you might find or think about when it comes to working memory. First of all, interviews or meetings or having a conversation with someone. Ever find yourself thinking, oh, what am I going to say next? Or if they ask you a question, you just kind of blank, or you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, I don't really know what to say. Like, oh, I'm just processing. Oh, I'm not really sure. This is one of the things that's going on because one of the parts of working memory is what, like, do I need to respond in any way? Like, do I need to ask a question? Do I need to clarify anything? Do I need to figure anything out? That what do I do next piece is part of working memory. Probably a super obvious one, but holding information in your head. You know, when someone says, oh, can you do a meeting on the 26th? And you're like, the 26th, 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 26th. You're holding it in your head and you're looking at your calendar, you're like, 26, 26, 26, 26. And you're looking at your calendar and you're trying to do both. And you're just like, no, I do not have the capacity to look at my calendar to figure out if I can do that meeting and hold the date that you need in my head. I cannot do both. or when you are copying information over. So you've written something down and then you're having to move it over somewhere else, or you're trying to merge two spreadsheets, whatever it is, you're moving information over in your head and you want to just hold it there in your head. That is also working memory. Or for me, just truly names. Just someone says their name and I'm like, hi name, bye name. It just goes in and it goes straight out again. The other one that is a super common one that you might also have worked out when we were talking about this is verbal instructions. So the super obvious example that always comes up with this is directions, but also if your boss is saying to you, oh, can you give me a report by the 16th and I want you to send it to HR and and can you include this information, and you're just like, whoa, do not understand what you just said and too much. The other one that is a little bit less well known that I think is a really useful example as well is practical instructions. So when you're learning a new piece of software or someone's teaching you how things are done, and you think to yourself, okay, I'm dyslexic, so if they send me an email with everything I need, that's going to feel really overwhelming because it's loads of text. But then they sit by you and they explain it step by step, and you're like, oh dear God, it's so much information. I just don't know where to begin. That again is working memory. When someone is like sitting there and explaining all these instructions, you just think to yourself, oh God. And then finally, everyone's favorite, if they're dyslexic, mental maths is also working memory. Because again, we're just holding pieces of information in our head. So these are some of the examples that maybe you had thought of when it comes to working memory, or maybe you hadn't. That gives you a sense of what is exactly happening when you're having these challenges. Because one of the things we talk a lot about in the Hive, and this is actually something Katie reinforced to me the other day, is when it comes to managing dyslexia, it's not about every single time needing a solution, every single circumstance needing a tip or a hack or approach, but it's about knowing when the shit hits the fan, when it's serious, when your boss's boss is in the room, you know what to do to get it right. That feeling that like when the spotlight is on you, when it matters most, you have the tools in your armor to be able to handle this. And what often happens with dyslexic people is because we don't kind of realize what is dyslexia and we don't have good systems, it's only like 2/3 of the way in that we start to realize, oh no, this is not going very well. And I'm kind of worried and it's not really working and I'm frustrated and oh God, it's too late. So, what is really important often is about knowing in advance whether or not something's going to be a problem. And if you got to shine, knowing you've got the solutions in place. Because ultimately, if you're just living your day-to-day life, it's really too much to constantly be thinking about strategies and tips and ways of managing dyslexia, but it's about in advance, knowing when you need to know that you have the things on hand. That's the way that I think about it. 90% of my life, I don't need strategies, I don't need ways of working, but when I need them, I really, really need them. I also need the confidence to know that I'm going to be fine in those moments so that I can go into the room, not feel stressed. I can go into the promotion and feel comfortable and capable, like I can do this. Which leads on to nicely the slide that I don't want to present, you don't want to hear, but we all have to sit through. So, unfortunately, it's like the whole you can't make the table any bigger part, there is some things that you need to know about working memory that I just think are a bit annoying, unfortunately. And that is basically that although you can't make it bigger, you can make it smaller. And so there's a number of things that impact your working memory that is really important to know. So you've heard me talk a lot about stress and managing that throughout this. One of the things that people say over and over again to me is that I feel so much more confident with dyslexia and it feels like the challenges have melted away. And that's partly because stress has a huge role on how we navigate dyslexia and how much it shows up. So do you ever think to yourself like, I'm fine at reading aloud when there's no one there. And then when I'm reading aloud in front of people, I just start jittering and like tripping over my words. Point in case. There's the bits that I super don't want to say. Good diet, more water, exercise, good night's sleep, all the stuff we know we should be doing anyway, but like let's face it, none of us ever do. So it's just another reason to do the things that you know you should do. And then also lots of breaks. So if you find yourself starting to fade, or you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I've got something really important here, trying to think about your day, how to approach your day. Like, don't overload yourself in the morning if you know you've got something really important to do in the afternoon, or try and think about when you are putting in important meetings and thinking about these things so that you have actually got some capacity in mind left. And there's nothing wrong, there's nothing shameful with this. This isn't, we're getting rid of this whole be better next Monday thing. We're just accepting this is the way that it is, and we're building in the good structures. So yeah, maybe you don't do a really tough task, then have a really important meeting. Maybe you just keep things light and simple in the morning, and then you're ready to be on form and a firecracker in the afternoon. And then the reality of modern day work is we are constantly doing 3, 4, 5 things at once. But the general advice for dyslexia is you want to try and monotask whereas possible. Dyslexic people say this to me all the time. I find it so much easier if I just have one thing that I can focus on and get done and then move on to the next. That is monotasking. That is how our brains want to work. So ultimately, there may be occasions where you have to do 2 or 3 things at once, but where possible, trying to only do one thing, move on to the next, move on to the next. You can do 10 things at once in a day. Just try and do one after the other.